Good afternoon, dear railway friends. Welcome to this new edition of the Quality Monthly from the IRQB. Thank you for answering this first poll. Others will follow, as you may know, those who are connecting every month. Let me also tell you again that you are able to ask questions in the frame of this Quality Monthly. And in this case, also, you can use the Menti system and raise your questions. And I will take this question into account at the end of the presentation and ask our speakers to give you the best insight of all their topics. So then let's start. I see that there are quite a lot of people knowing the subject, but maybe willing to know a little bit more. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So welcome to this May edition. As you have already seen, today we address a very technical aspect in the organizations of the companies, which is a key element, and it's the so-called process approach, which is to be taken into account for most of the conformity assessment which are done in the different systems. Just for your information as well, this view of process approach was started beginning of the century, and we could believe that nowadays everybody is fully aware of what it is and how to behave and use this. Let's see what our speakers think about it, and they will also share with you their experience in that on that point. Let's go to the speakers. Next slide, please. I'm absolutely happy to have experts with me to explain you a little bit how they perceive, implement, and understand the process approach. First, I'm absolutely happy to have Paul Simpson with us. He's the chair of the ISO TC 176 Subcommittee 2, dealing with quality systems. He might tell you a little bit that he's a little bit busy currently because, as far as I know, there are some reflections starting on the next way of the ISO 9001 as well. And he is the key person on that. Then I will have also Giselle Frizou with us. She is lead auditor at IRIS for AFNOR, and she will give you a little bit her experience in auditing. Louise Nietzsche will follow. She is from Siemens Mobility and tell you a little bit how this process approach is implemented, or how is the view in an industrial system integrated company. And last but not least, Ursula Tucker, working for Unife and in charge of the witness auditor pool and managing this, will give you also her view on this aspect in the field. Next slide, please. First, I will, as a preamble, give you just a few additional information how we feel this at the IRQB. Next slide, please. By the implementation of the IRIS certification scheme, we need absolutely that a process approach is well implemented, because this will help all the system, all the process to be assessed in the best way. Several examples: the request of having a data package sent to the auditors, where a stakeholder analysis and turtle diagrams are done, explaining how the different processes are working together. And of course, with a very thorough process approach, that's much easier. Another very important point is the performance assessment, done, as you may know, for IRIS at 5 mandatory processes. And here as well, it's important to have this view in order to be able to explain in a very simple, clear way how the organization is working through these elements. Another aspect is finally the customer perception, which is a key element for the IRQB community and done in the IRIS certification scheme in order to ensure that all the organizations are focused on the customer's requirements, on the customer satisfaction, and a well-organized process approach will help to that. In a nutshell, we strongly believe that from the process definition through a daily application, all is perfect to have a good product quality, what of course IRIS certification and the IRQB is seeking for. So that as a preamble. Now I will hand over to the first speaker, who will be Paul Simpson on the next slide, and he will give us the view from a standard point of view. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the process approach from me. As Bernard has mentioned, there are some issues running around at the moment about potential revision. IRQB for to present. I'm very much pleased to do that, and again you'll see a little bit about that. The first slide, which I'll go through fairly quickly, says I've been around quality for more years than I care to remember. Range of experiences, including in the rail sector. So I have worked for Network Rail here in the UK for 4 years before starting my own business, which is S2A2S. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. Again, apologies, very tight time scale, so I will be running through these fairly quickly. If you have any questions, either during this session or afterwards, please do get in touch through IRQB, and I'll be very happy to take those questions. Essentially here we're talking about the process approach and the change that took place in 2000, where the standard focused on processes as a way that organizations deliver products and services and deliver good quality. So we've emphasized the need for the process approach for many years, but it's interesting that now, some 20 odd years on, we still have some issues with people understanding what the process approach is intended to deliver and how processes are seen from a standards perspective. Next slide, please. So the whole thing with organizations, and we speak about the organization's core processes, is these are the ways that they deliver those products and services that customers require. But one of the things that we wanted to emphasize when ISO 9001 changed to include the process approach was this idea of complexity. So we have processes that operate across the business, but they all interact and they are all dependent on one another. And where that becomes important for auditors of quality management systems is that they need to understand those interactions and need to understand the key control characteristics for processes to be able to evaluate whether the organization has an effective quality management system. The third bullet there again is to say that when you are in a sector such as rail, the supply chain network is extremely complex, and the organizations that you are auditing, assessing, or are part of have to have processes in place to capture those complexities with other supply chain partners to be able to ensure that the end result for the infrastructure manager or the rolling stock manufacturer are suitable and sufficient to satisfy customers. Next slide, please. And this is just a brief summary of a much larger presentation where we talk about how processes themselves are not in isolation. So if we look at a manufacturing process, for example, we need to make sure that as auditors we understand where the processes fit within the organization and how those interactions between a couple of examples that are in there, the policies of the organization, the values, the ethics, the context of the organization, how those influence how those processes operate. And similarly, and one of the sort of key drivers for audit is how do we monitor and measure our processes? So the final bullet there talks about the key performance indicators, the KPIs, that demonstrate that these processes are working as they should and are, in the end, going to be satisfying customer requirements. Next slide, please. Again, back to the point of process interaction. As auditors, to be signed off as competent to operate within the rail sector, we have to have that understanding of who those key supply chain organisations are and how they influence the core processes of the organisation that we're auditing. So going into an organisation as part of an IRIS certification audit, for example, you need to be able to understand where the organisation sits in that network and where they are reliant on information from the customer and information from suppliers to be able to do their job. Next slide, please. And again, just a mention back to ISO 9001. So ISO 9001, which sits at the heart of ISO TS 22163, or the soon-to-be ISO 22163, has a whole section dealing with the process approach. There is still guidance in the introduction to 9001, and there is a core requirement under clause 4.4 where the requirements to do with processes are highlighted. So this is for users and for auditors to say, how does the organisation identify inputs, outputs, key controls, risks and opportunities, and measures of process effectiveness? So 9001 covers those in some detail, and as auditors, we should be familiar with those requirements and auditing to those requirements. Next slide, please. And the last couple of slides, it's really to emphasize the importance of the process approach. We believed in the early days of 9001 that organizations were very much thinking in terms of documents, procedures, and functions within the organization, and they could exist in what they call this silo thinking, and there would be, if you were lucky, key performance indicators for how marketing provided information to sales, how sales provided information into engineering, and how engineering provided controls for production. But what we wanted to do with the process approach, and again the next slide please, is to move towards this idea that the processes exist to satisfy customer requirements, whether that is from a new product introduction perspective or whether it is part of fulfilling the customer's orders, so receiving an inquiry through to delivery of the products and services that the customer has asked for. And I say, and all of those processes really sit across the business and cross those functional boundaries. So that's as much as I had planned. I'm looking forward to any questions, and so when we go into the Q&A session later on, I'll be very happy to take any questions. Look forward to hearing those. Thanks very much. I will now hand back to Bernard and to IRQB.
Thank you very much, Paul, for this very clear and interesting presentation. I'm sure that we will have questions for this at the end of this session. So let's now have the point of view of an IRIS lead auditor. And for this, Giselle will help us. The floor is yours, Giselle.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. So my name is Giselle Frizou. I am an IRIS lead auditor for AFNOR certification since 2006. So since the first beginning of the first V0 of IRIS. My purpose today is to share with you on how this process approach is understood and managed by the companies. And if I fully agree on what Paul just said, unfortunately, I'm not sure that this process approach is fully understood by all the organization. If the process approach is present everywhere, for sure, because it is a requirement. So we always find processes and the process landscape and so on. Very often we realize that there is some misunderstanding from the companies on the real role of the process, that is to trigger the performance. And I appreciate what Paul said about this and the link with the KPIs and so on. But unfortunately, I think there is some misunderstanding. So if I can have the next slide, please. Okay. So what I put here is, I think the first misunderstanding that we found during audits is that a process is not a procedure. The process is here to define what the company wants to achieve, but not how to achieve it. And it is something that very often they don't understand, and there is a mixture between process and procedure. The second point is a confusion also between process and company organization. So you were talking about silos, and unfortunately, sometimes the silos are here, and it is not so easy to get to destroy the walls. Okay. For example, I have an example that we see very often when we talk about control of external provider, and we look at the process. So we have presentation on the sourcing approach, what they are doing, and so on and so on. And when we want to talk about supplier quality, the answer that we get is, but supplier quality, it's not me, it's quality. No, it is not. It may be in the quality department, but it's still part of the EPPPS process. And in some companies, it's very, very difficult for the people to take responsibility when it is a transversal responsibility like that, because they feel that it is in another department, so we cannot, I cannot put this in my process because it's not under my full responsibility. So in the result of this, what we very often get is a process landscape that has no added value. And again, the process map is required by the standard. So we have the process map, and it is required by the auditor. If we don't have a process map, we have a non-conformity. So of course, they put one, they document one in their quality manual or something like that. But it is not really used and updated if needed. So if they change in their organization and they change processes, sometimes we have landscapes that are absolutely not in line with the reality because they don't think about this document. Outsourced processes, for example, are very rarely presented in the process map. So we have difficulties to understand exactly what are the activities that are covered by the site and by the scope of the QMS. And even in some company, and after years of ISO and so on, they still don't really understand why do we have to document the scope. And it is something that is a weakness in not all the organization, but some organization. Okay, can I get the next slide, please? So, what to change? Okay, what do the organization need to change to have a more effective process approach? I think first of all is to use a turtle presentation because it is different from a procedure. So like that, in the mind of the people, when we talk about a process, they fully understand that we are not requiring a procedure on how we are going to do things and so on. So for me, it is very important. Whatever the presentation of the turtle, you can see on my slide that I have a very beautiful turtle, but whatever the turtle, the principle is to be a graph like that with drawings and so on, and very, very simple to understand. The second point is to define the main purpose of the process. But again, something clear and simple, because when you look, sometimes they all have the same purpose because they want to change the full world, okay? They do a lot of things and you don't really know what is the main purpose of the process. And also, when I say identify all main contributors, actors from other departments, I mean, they have to feel and to understand that they are in the same family. So they really work together, whoever their boss is, or if they are in another department. And once this is done, and we really talk about a process, please find KPIs, relevant KPIs, to be able to monitor and evaluate the achievement regarding the purpose. Not, okay, oh, I've done my audits, so it's good. Okay, but what is the purpose of the process? If the purpose of the process is to improve on time delivery, why do you measure something different? And even when they have this KPI, if targets are not achieved, you are supposed to have a specific action plan. And sometimes it's quite difficult to find this very specific action plan, to be sure that this action will help to improve this result and this performance. Okay, so next slide, please. Oh, and I forgot just to say that, of course, there is a link also with all the relevant interested parties that can help them to achieve this target. So the result, when the concept is fully understood, is very, very impressive. And I have some very good example of companies that were really not working. They had their own business and they have the process approach, and it is completely separated. It doesn't work. But when they do it, it's a real trigger for continual improvement. You find much more commitment, true commitment of the process owners. They really understand the purpose of the process reviews, and the process reviews become very, very effective. And also the feedback that you have in the quality management is relevant. Because a quality management review, if you have 200 pages of things that doesn't mean really anything, I would say it is not worth it. It also pushes on a stronger leadership, because when they understand that you make the link with the performance and it is really helpful for that, the QMS is really part of the business management. You have effectiveness and, I would say, real effectiveness and efficiency of the QMS, and the performance is improving. Okay, I have a next slide just to say thank you to you for your listening and your attention. And Bernard, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Giselle. We feel really that auditors seek for elements to be shared in audits more precisely and so on. So now let's see if Louise will back your expectations from a company point of view. Louise, please.
Thank you very much, Bernard. My name is Louise Nitsche and I'm a Quality Systems Manager at Siemens Mobility, and I'm responsible for the topic of IRIS certification. So today I would like to talk about the process approach in internal audits. And therefore I would like to give you a brief insight in the audit methodology of a performance-oriented process audit. So Can we go to my next slide, please? Because there I have a question to you. I would be really interested in why do you perform internal audits? Are you performing it because you have to ensure your certification? Do you do it to create business impact, or is it both? You can go on Menti and tell me. So I'm really glad that almost nobody does it to just ensure the certification. And I'm really glad to see that that the reason is in most time both. For me, it's the same. Of course, we have to show our certification, but it is really, really important to create business impact with the internal audits. So I have another question to you. We can go to my next slide, please. I would like to know, if you perform internal audits, do you include key performance indicators? So is it no, because they are discussed in other meetings, like management meetings, or do you include them sometimes? Or is it a really important element to you? So I think there are clear answers. So it's even the one side or the other, but I'm very happy to see that most of you always include KPIs into internal audits. And I think that is very, very important to evaluate processes. Without KPIs, it's almost not possible. So we can go to my next slide. So I would like to explain what is a performance-oriented process audit. So as you can see, on the one hand, a process needs to fulfill certain process requirements, which can be described as process enablers. In an audit, it is checked, of course, if the process fulfills the requirements, for example, of the ISO TS 22163, and if the process is applied. And based on this, the process conformity is evaluated. On the other hand, you can see the process delivers a certain result, which can be measured with performance indicators. So most of conventional audits focus on checking the general conformity of a process of a respective standard. But there are processes which may fulfill standard requirements, but they can be not performing. And due to that, it is really important to take performance indicators into account. And performance processes leads to an increased satisfaction of internal and external customers. So therefore, take process results into account. I saw you already do that, and focus more on the performance and the results of a process within your audit. So shifting the focus from process conformity to process performance also will increase your internal audit and the impact of that. We can go to my next slide, where I would like to give you a short overview how such a performance-oriented process audit looks like. You have 4 phases. The preparation and planning phase, the off-site analysis, the on-site analysis, the on-site execution, and the audit report and the follow-up. So in the first phases, there are some changes made because they are really strengthened. Within my presentation, I will have a closer look at the first 3 phases, and I would like to start with the preparation phase. So when we perform a performance-oriented process audit, we request a data package. You probably know a data package from your IRIS audits, from your third-party audits, but then that can really increase the efficiency of your internal audit. On the right side, you can see some schematic overview of the data package. So we ask for guidelines, procedures, and turtle diagrams as an auditor to get an overview of the process which we will audit internally. Further, we ask for a process-based stakeholder analysis. I guess Giselle highlighted this as well. It is really important as an auditor to understand what are the requirements of the process stakeholders to the process you are auditing. You can ask for risk and opportunities, and of course you can further ask for the results of the process reviews which have been performed before. This will give you a really good overview. And in the end, which is one of the most important factors for me, ask for key performance indicators. Ask the process owner to send you the KPI definition sheets, the performance data of the last 12 months, and then you can go in the offsite analysis to analyze all this information and prepare for your audit. Now we can go to my next slide, and there I have a question for you again. So let me know, how do you perform your internal audit? Do you use ISO TS 22163 questionnaires, or do you use ISO 9001 questionnaires, or do you create your own questionnaire? So that's quite interesting. I'm really surprised that most of you create your own questionnaire based on the weak points you did the analysis. So actually I do it the same way. I analyze the data package and write down my weak points. Of course, I take into account the requirements of the ISO TS 22163 to check the conformity of the standard. But I write down the weak points as well in my own questionnaire, and that I would like to explain on my next slide. So within the offsite analysis, the audit team checks the data package, as I explained. You can get a really detailed overview of the process, of the procedures you got, the turtle diagrams. You can check even this process regarding the compliance to the ISO TS 22163 that you can do before the audit. You don't have to do it within the audit. You can check the process before and mark all critical points. You can mark the process steps where improvements have to be taken and where the process is not compliant, and include this in your own questionnaire. Further, you have the possibility to select your own samples before the audit, because you already got the data package, which you can analyze in very detail. You can take samples where, for example, a project is having a red light, and on that you can further check the process during the on-site execution in detail. And on the last point, you already said it, you do it the same way. You create your own questionnaire based on the analysis which have been done of the data package. Now I would like to go to my next slide, where I will have a look at the audit itself. So to perform a process audit, there are actually two ways to do that. You can do the auditing from according to the process flow, from the input to the output, or you could even start from the performance-based result of a process. That means in the end. In this example, we will look at the performance-based approach, and this can be explained very well with a with a turtle visualization. So in this turtle diagram, you can see some red little numbers, which defines the sequence of the audit elements. I cannot explain all of them today, but I will just focus on some of them. So when I do such an audit, I start in the first place to look if all relevant stakeholders have been identified. And this includes, of course, the process customers. They can be internally, of course. Then I go into the performance evaluation, where I need, of course, process KPIs, and I check if the requirements of the stakeholders are met. For example, does the process deliver the customer expected results? When you have, for example, a purchasing process, the manufacturing process always wants the parts to be on time and on quality, and are those requirements are taken into account. And then you go in the deeper analysis of the process. You focus on the weak points you have already identified in the offsite analysis. You take your samples, which you have chosen, and due to that, you have a very great possibility to go into a very detailed process and make a very detailed analysis. And in the end, you can use the performance evaluation matrix of the Appendix 6 of the conformity assessment, and you can evaluate the process performance and the process application. I like this matrix very much because I can use it to evaluate every process. I can see if the process performance and application is increasing, and I can measure it from year to year. And of course, I always include the performance evaluation metrics in my audit report. Now I would like to summarize my presentation on my last slide. Strengthen the preparation and planning and analysis phase of your audit. This will benefit your work on site and greatly improve the efficiency of your audit. Take stakeholder requirements into account and focus on process results during preparation and execution phase. And this will shift the audit focus from process conformity to process performance. And in the end, create business value with your internal audit. Thank you very much, and I will hand back to Bernard.
Thank you very much, Louise. So now we continue with an analysis done by the IRIS certification process oversight. And here Ursula will give us a flavor of what we see when we are a little bit in an helicopter view of the rail IRIS certification process. Ursula, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bernard. My name is Ursula Tacke, and as already mentioned by Bernard, I'm working for Unife as an IRIS Master Witness Auditor. And first, I would like to introduce a little bit who are the IRIS Witness Auditors and what is their task. So we are a team of about 20 railway specialists, mostly working in the quality areas, either in system integrators or equipment manufacturers. And we also have some freshly retired specialists, which also support us in witnessing. So all these witnessers have to undergo a witness auditor training before we allow them to perform the witnessing in the industry. Due to this international team, we can cover a wide range of languages where we can perform witness audits, and mainly due to the COVID pandemic, we are also now performing remotely the witness audit, which also allows us to cover much more countries than it was possible in the past. Sorry, I cannot see the presentation anymore. I don't know what happened. Is it just me?
No, I think we lost Arthur and his presentation.
Okay, then let's wait. He'll be back in a minute, I expect. Yeah.
He's back.
Okay, now I can then I continue now. So what we are doing? So there is a so-called framework agreement in place between Unife and the certification bodies we request that each IRIS auditor is at least once in 3 years witnessed by one of our witnessers. And at the end of the witness audit, the witness auditor creates a witness audit report, and this report we take at UNIFE to decide if the validity of the IRIS auditor is extended and how long it is extended. So if an IRIS audit, witnessed IRIS audit went very well, we extend the auditor validity by 3 years. And if it's shown weaknesses, we also maybe limit it to 1 year. And with this approach, we want to assure and to improve, let's say, the quality of the IRIS audit itself. On the next slide, I have just summarized all the 22 mandatory processes that IRIS certification is requiring. I selected this, let's say, this picture as a word cloud, and you can also already see that this seems to be quite complicated, that there are a lot of interfaces and interactions between these 22 processes. And for the IRIS auditing itself, we see on the next slide what needs to be done to perform the IRIS audit. So on the left side, I have listed some, let's say, basic stuff that needs to be done during an IRIS audit. So as already mentioned by Bernard, the enablers have to be checked. This can be, for example, topics like knowledge or competence or infrastructure. Then, as already explained deeply by Louise, the process performance of the 5 defined processes needs to be assessed. And what is for sure key is the customer perception that also has to be assessed and audited during the IRIS audit. But this is also, let's say, everything that is on the left side in this slide. But if we really want to apply the process approach in IRIS auditing, the auditors have to go the extra mile and have also to cover the topics that are put into the square on the right side, where they also have to look at the sequence and the interactions of the processes, where they have to look if there is a consistency existing. Is there maybe an added value of the quality management system for the organization? Is the system effective or even efficient? And this is quite complicated for IRIS auditors to perform. And from my experience, or from the experience also from the other witnesses, the estimation is that using the process approach in IRIS audits can be managed by, like, let's say, like 10 or 15% of the auditors that were witnessed until today. On the next slide, I listed some typical don'ts that we regularly see during witness audits. So, for example, some auditors follow the questionnaire in the IRIS audit tool, question per question. As already mentioned by Giselle, the procedure is not the process, but very often the auditors just look for the numbers and the revision of the procedures, and they're not interested in the content of the process itself. They audit strictly what was planned for the session and forget the big picture. For example, when auditing in production, they just focus on the topics related to production, and they, for example, do not check in parallel the competency of the staff or the training topics and so on. So, which is also a major weakness, is that very often the companies prepare the evidences they want to show in the different audit sessions, and the audited companies just accept it and do not dig into it deeper or ask for own examples. They just believe what is shown to them, and that's it. And from our point of view, from the witnesses' point of view, this is a quite weak approach. We also very often see that the creating of non-conformities is avoided because the additional work that is involved in this wants to be vermeiden. And very often the assessment itself is not done on the, let's say, maturity levels and the evidences. There's very often feelings are involved, and that is also quite common is that the auditors are very familiar with the audited company. So this is just a list of examples, so-called don'ts that we regularly see when we are witnessing, but for sure this does not support the process approach in auditing and does not really add, let's say, giving added value to the audited organization. On my last slide, I've listed some of the do's, which we really appreciate to see in witness audits. That is the use of open questions. That really, let's say, puts the auditee in the position to really get explanations, show evidences, and so on. It's very some of the very good IRIS auditors follow one trail through the whole audit. So they pick a certain project or a certain product at the very beginning of the audit, and then they follow the whole product through the audit. So they look related to this product, they look for the training evidences, for the qualification of the employees. They look for the, let's say, for the production equipment, for the process validation, and so on. So we really like to see this approach when we are witnessing. We also like if the objectives of the companies and the achievement of the targets is questioned or challenged, even challenged by the auditors. We also like to see if the auditors look for opportunities for improvement. As Giselle has already explained earlier, there are usually a lot of weaknesses visible in the companies, and if the auditors do not really apply the real do's that from this list, the companies audited will never get aware of their weaknesses, and they will never get the chance to improve. Then we like when auditors dig deeper into topics where there might be misunderstandings or things not clear. We like that the performance of the process is assessed after the process itself was audited and checked. So if the process meeting the requirements, is all these things fulfilled, and the performance shall be assessed after the process was audited. And which is very, very rare, but we like very much, is that from time to time the IRIS auditor steps, let's say, out of the audit, takes the glasses of the customer of the organization and asks, let's say, the questions or looks for evidences from the customer point of view of the organization. And if these do's are applied by IRIS auditors in the audits, the weaknesses and opportunities will become clearly visible, and the organization is then put in the position to really improve its system and improve the internal maturity of the system, and the company's success will grow. So with this, I'm at the end of my presentation and hand over to Bernard.
Thank you very much, Ursula, for these very detailed points. Let's now go to the next slide, which are question and answers. So a few questions I have to raise to the speakers. The first one I will raise to Giselle. Based on your auditor experience, how do you assess the process approach during internal audits within the companies? What is your feeling about that? Because internal audit, you know, is a requirement since the very first edition of ISO 9001, 1987. So it's a basic requirement. How do you feel today that this has integrated this? And is it a usual practice, or you still have some 30 years after, you still have some doubts on it? Giselle?
Well, Bernard, thanks for the question. I really wish we could find auditors doing, internal auditors doing audit like Louise described it. Unfortunately, we don't always have this level of quality of experience, I would say, in the internal auditor that we see. I think for me, what is the most recurrent weakness in internal audit done by the company, because they want to do this process audit, because always talk about process audit, do a process approach when you do your audit. So they forget that you also have to cover the requirement of the standard. So it's not only auditing the process, it's make sure that when you audit the process, you cover all the requirements. And we find requirements that are never covered by internal audit. So sometimes my recommendation would be to, sometimes when you don't have a very high experience auditor, forget the process approach, you take one paragraph and you audit all the requirements that you have in this specific paragraph, and you will be very surprised that you will find some point that maybe you have never looked at in an internal audit. And I think it's for me the biggest weakness that we have during audits, and we raise non-conformity in internal audit. For example, they forget the management process because you don't audit the boss, okay? So in fact, you have all the requirements of the first 4.1, 4.2, okay, or the chapter 5 or whatever. It is completely forgotten because they don't realize they have to do that. Another point they forget is audit the audit process. All the requirements of the 9.2, okay? But yeah, you have to audit this to be sure that you follow what is required. And that's what I could say on internal audit. Okay, Bernard.
Okay, thank you, Giselle. On the same subject, internal audit, I have another question to Louise at that time. Does an internal audit, in your view, require additional resources, taking into account also the performance approach we have within IRIS?
So from my point of view, if you perform an audit like according to this approach, you need more time in the preparation and in the offsite analysis. So this really takes more time compared to conventional audits. I think it's almost the same time you use for that compared to the audit itself. That is the fact, it is a fact, but from my point of view, you have a lot more business impact if you perform an audit like that, and you will increase your management system more in the process.
Okay, thank you, Louise. The next question is for Ursula. In your presentation, you spoke about following one trail. Can you a little bit elaborate on what you mean with this?
Yeah, that is we rarely see it, but if it happens, it's very good that one, let's say one product is design and development is audited quite early in the audit, and then they pick a product that is in the design and development area, and then the auditors follow the complete product through all the processes, through all the let's say also supporting processes like in HR, what qualification is needed to produce this product, what qualification is maybe necessary to develop this product, what supporting material is needed, how are the suppliers qualified to buy the parts for this product, and so on. So I really like this approach, because if the auditors perform it like this, and if they pick their own example, you can very, very good see if everything in the organization is in place or not. So I really like this approach, to really follow this product through the whole organization, through all processes, and check everything that is related to this product. I really like this approach.
Okay, thank you, Ursula. Now I have a question to Paul. A little bit in his role of TC176, Do you expect major evolution in the next years in the ISO 9001, especially in the field of the process approach?
It's a good question. I say at the moment we are in a position where there is no revision approved for ISO 9001. If and when there is a decision to revise the standard, which I say could be in the next couple of years perhaps, we will produce a design brief which will say what the content of that proposal is. But as it stands, there is a lot of buy-in across TC 176 to the process approach. So I can't see it happening when we next revise 9001, because as I say, everyone sees the value of that process approach.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Another question to Louise, related to, we spoke a lot about the customer relation. What is important to include process customer requirements, especially in the internal process audits, in order to check that all the customer requirements are taken into account? How do you see this in the companies?
Well, from my point of view, that is a very important factor. If you take customer requirements or from process customers into account, you get a completely different view on the process. Sometimes the process owner and the process customer have a different understanding and have different targets. And therefore, I think it's really important to take this into account. And I think it's very important as well that the process owner gets into the discussion with their process customers, because yeah, they had different views, and it's important to improve the interfaces of the process.
Okay, thank you, Louise. My very last question will be for Ursula. We spoke a lot about the different ways to achieve objectives, but with your expertise in oversight, can you give us examples on how the company could question themselves on how to define the objectives?
Okay, a typical example for me is if the on-time delivery key performance indicator. So the company might define their internal target for the on-time delivery to customers. Let's take the example 65%, and they even exceed and achieve the target of 67%. And the company is quite happy. Every KPI is green, everything is good. But if you put yourself, or the auditor puts himself in the position of a customer, it's easily to see that one of 3 products will be delivered late. So from this point of view, yes, they have defined an objective. They have even overestimated or overachieved it. But for sure, this is not a target that keeps the customer, makes the customer happy, because this is the position you have to question yourself, or also as an organization. The task, okay, maybe it's hard to achieve, but then I have to let's say start additional activities to achieve it. But a target of 65% for on-time delivery to a customer is something that an IRIS auditor shall always question, because for sure this is not in line with customer expectations. So this is for me a typical example that can easily be understood. And if you, let's say, apply it to your personal or private life, if you are buying things and every third thing is always delayed, you will never accept this as a customer. So this is one of my typical examples for this.
Thank you, Ursula. Very, very clear answer. And I would say that's also the perfect wording for ending this quality monthly on process approach. You spoke about on-time delivery. I see that regarding my watch, we are perfectly on time. This means our communication process is on time, is delivering on time. So I would only add that you can already prepare for our dear audience. You can prepare for the next quality monthly, which will be held on the 10th of June. And the topic will be a country focus this time again, and we will focus on Spain, which is a major rail country. This Spanish Quality Monthly will be held in the Spanish language, with, of course, adequate translations, no problem for all our worldwide speakers. That's for the next appointment. And for today, I would like to thank all of you for listening and or watching, because I know that some of you are looking at the video later on, and those who cannot participate as well. Have a nice weekend, and I hope to see you soon on our Quality Monthly channel. Thank you and bye-bye.